Canada is huge, more than 10 million square kilometers, with towering mountains, Arctic tundra, immense forests and prairies, thousands of lakes and rivers, and the world's longest coastline. For this reason, aviation is our primary method of transportation. Many hundreds of aircraft, both large and small, are airborne at every moment. To the credit of the pilots, aviation remains an extremely safe and efficient way to travel. But accidents do happen. There are times when an aircraft is lost because of pilot error, weather conditions, or mechanical failure. This is what we want to talk about today: the search and rescue of downed aircraft and the volunteers who look for them. These men and women are called spotters, and their job is a matter of life or death. Despite the enormous areas of uninhabited terrain, a majority of fallen aircraft are found. The search and rescue teams of Canada's Department of National Defence and the volunteer spotters of the Civil Air Search and Rescue Association can be proud of this. Saving people's lives is not something that many of us get the chance to do. Now that you've signed on to become a volunteer spotter, the challenge is just beginning. When you work as a spotter aboard a search aircraft, whether civilian or military, you are one of the most vital and essential elements of the team. The pilot and navigator must concentrate on flying the plane, uncovering the search area in exact precision in relation to the ground. You act as the eyes of the aircraft, so your role as the spotter is vital. The success of the operation depends on you. An efficient spotter has keen, tenacious eyes. You must be in good physical condition and well rested before the search mission. You must be able to move about in an aircraft. For example, in a military aircraft, such as the Hercules, the spotters rotate in and out of the spotter window and walk in the aircraft to reach the spotter's chair. The floor of a Hercules aircraft is covered with cargo and tie-down rings. If there's turbulence, this could be difficult if you do not have good mobility. In civilian aircraft, you remain seated. Do not take medications, such as Gravol, to alleviate the symptoms of motion sickness. This makes you drowsy. You could try using C-bands if you are mildly affected, but if this does not improve your condition, you should not volunteer to be a spotter. Weight restrictions apply to small aircraft. Bear this in mind when you are being assigned to an aircraft for a search. Be careful about your personal baggage. Keep it light, small personal items, and pocket-sized survival kits, and consult with the pilot before loading.
A Cessna 172 carrying 2 passengers becomes lost and crashes in a snowstorm. The pilot and passenger are injured. The search plane flies near the site twice without seeing the downed aircraft. The survivors describe the despair felt when the aircraft flew past.
So you went from a feeling of exaltation that there's the plane, they're going to know we're here, seeing the tail end of that plane go away, and hearing it for minutes later was just awful.
You must realize the importance of the task you've taken on. Lives are at stake. You might be the one who saves them. Remember, your success in spotting may mean the difference between rescue and death. Here's what you must learn to become a spotter: how a search is conducted, how a Casera team prepares for a search mission, how to prepare yourself as a spotter for the mission, safety considerations of different aircraft used, how to scan, how to identify an accident scene, how to report a sighting. Here's how a search is conducted. The Joint Rescue Coordination Center initializes the search when an aircraft is overdue, declares an emergency, or in response to an ELT signal. All airports are checked along the intended route of flight, as well as the landing field and beyond the destination. If the communication search reveals nothing, then military and civilian aircraft are dispatched. The initial track crawl is flown at a high altitude to try to locate the ELT signal. The visual track crawl is conducted at 1,500 feet above ground level and with a scanning visibility of 3 miles. It is intended to look for signs of the aircraft and any signals from survivors. An ELT search is also conducted at this time. If this reveals nothing, then the searchmaster or Casera search coordinator begins to set up first and second probability areas to search along the flight path. Lines of search are assigned taking into account factors such as weather, terrain, open ground or heavily forested areas, rivers and lakes, time of year, and lighting. Here's how a CASERA team prepares for a search. The Joint Rescue Coordination Center will contact the CASERA zone for their assistance, either as an independent resource or in conjunction with the military. The CASERA zone duty officer receives the call and contacts the other CASERA members to report to the search headquarters. Do not ask questions regarding the search. This wastes valuable time. The duty officer has other calls to make. You should be prepared to arrive within 30 minutes of the call. If you are taking a bag, have it packed and ready to go. When you arrive at headquarters, the search coordinator will be briefing you on all the necessary information. The search master or search coordinator will brief the crew as to the description of the aircraft, its occupants, and the events leading up to the search. Record all the information given by the search coordinator, including the aircraft type, color, number of people on board, and emergency equipment carried. Record the search area assigned, the visibility distance you will be using, and the altitude. The safety officer briefs you on pertinent points that you should know. The pilot prepares a flight plan, weight and balance, and gives a safety briefing at the aircraft. The navigator prepares maps for the search area assigned. Here's how to prepare yourself for a search. Searching is hard work and can be a tiring job. It requires a great deal of physical stamina and medical fitness. Be sure that you are well rested prior to your search mission and that you are physically and mentally prepared. If you have a medical problem or have a cold that day, don't volunteer to be a spotter. Your illness might make it necessary for the search aircraft to return to base to let you off, wasting valuable search time. Searching requires a great deal of mental alertness, and you must be able to concentrate. When you report to your search aircraft, you should wear proper footwear and dress warmly, the same amount of clothing you would wear for the weather outside. Wear sunglasses and perhaps a ball cap, especially in winter. Searching a snow-covered area can easily lead to snow blindness. On CASERA aircraft, each member will wear a set of headphones for communication and protection against aircraft noise. On military aircraft, only the active spotters wear headphones. So have earplugs for protection while you are waiting for your turn to spot. SARTECs in military aircraft rotate spotters every 20 to 30 minutes to rest their eyes. During this rotation, it's important for the active spotter to maintain visual contact with the search area until the replacement spotter is in position and has established continuity with the search area and communication with the pilot. You should close your eyes and rest during this break. CASERA aircraft do not rotate spotters on a regular basis. You need to take time at the end of a search leg to rest your eyes. Do not continue looking out the window. The navigator will instruct you when you are back on the search leg again. Communication intercoms are provided in order to talk to the pilot. A communication check will be done at the start of your rotation.
Spotter check.
Never talk during takeoffs or landings unless it is an emergency. The pilot may be talking with the control tower and receiving important information. Wait until you are airborne to speak and keep unimportant conversation to a minimum. If you feel you have spotted the object of the search, that takes priority and you must call the pilot around immediately.
Turn left. There it is, in the bush.
You must be aware of the safety considerations of the different aircraft used in a search. The safety briefing is mandatory and is an important source of information. The pilot, or in the case of a military aircraft, the loadmaster or SARTEC, will give the briefing. Listen carefully to the points about safety and emergency procedures for the aircraft that you will be flying in. Never touch the external antennas or exterior parts of the aircraft, and never touch any of the switches inside. Remember that the pilot is the final authority on safety and procedures while in or around the aircraft. Should the pilot, loadmaster, or SARTEC give instructions during the flight, you need to pay close attention and respond immediately, as this may concern your own safety or that of your crewmates. In military aircraft, such as the Hercules or the Buffalo, there are both front and rear exits. The crew door located in the front of the plane is usually used for loading and unloading crew. Sometimes the back ramp is also used. Make sure you pay attention as to what is expected should an emergency happen. The main source of danger concerning the helicopter is the main rotor and the tail rotor. The main rotor blades can droop or sag as low as 6 feet in any direction around the helicopter, so always duck when entering or departing and never walk under the tail boom. Additional training is mandatory before being tasked on a helicopter. How to scan is the most important thing you have to learn. Scanning is a method of looking that allows spotters to search the whole of the assigned area in a systematic way. The pilot, first officer, or navigator will give you an example of the scanning distance. These distances are usually 1/2, 1, or 3 miles, depending on the altitude. The visibility, distance, and search altitude are assigned, bearing in mind the size of the object of the search, the terrain, the weather, the foliage, and the number of search aircraft available. As a rule, the first visual search anticipating signals from survivors is made at an altitude of 1,500 feet with a scanning range of 3 miles. The next is made at 1,000 feet and a scanning range of 1 mile. The final search is carried out at 500 feet and a scanning range of 1/2 mile. Just sitting in the window and looking at the ground indiscriminately is ineffective. Most of what we can actually focus on falls within an area covered by a fist held at arm's length. The eyes should move from one point to another, resting for a moment on each of these fist-sized areas. The ground below can be scanned thoroughly in this way. When scanning on the left side of the aircraft, move your eyes in parallel lines starting at the outer limits of the scanning range assigned by the pilot and move in toward the aircraft. Return your eyes to the outer limit of the scanning range to begin the next line of scan and again move in toward the aircraft. When scanning on the right side of the aircraft, move your eyes in parallel lines starting close to the aircraft and move toward the outer limits of the scanning range assigned. Return your eyes to the inner limits of the scanning range to begin the next line of scan, and again, move out from the aircraft to the outer limits of the scanning range. The forward motion of the aircraft will dictate how fast you must scan to cover the whole area, and it is the forward motion of the aircraft that, in effect, brings the next line of scan into position for you. Regardless of the time available, it is important that your eyes do not simply sweep in continuous motion without focusing on the ground. If your eyes are out of focus, you can miss a lot. This is why it is important to keep your eyes focused on the ground during your period of searching. Do not look up from the ground to the inside of the aircraft or to external parts of it. While you're returning to focus, you may miss the object of the search. Occasionally, take a quick glance to the rear and below the aircraft to see if you can spot any signs of survivors, like smoke or flares. The important point to remember is that you must complete one scan and return your eyes to the next starting point quickly enough so that the next scanning line in relation to the ground is just forward but adjacent to the last. In most military aircraft, the seating arrangement makes scanning much easier as you face directly to the 3 o'clock or 9 o'clock positions in the spotter's window. In civilian aircraft, where you sit facing forward, you must rotate your body 90 degrees left or right to face the window directly so that you can scan the 3 o'clock or 9 o'clock positions. With practice, you will learn to scan the ground between the aircraft and the scanning range at a constant rate. Now that you know how to scan, you must know what to look for. Remember that the search object may not be in one piece and may not resemble an aircraft at all. You are looking for the clues of a crash site. Here are the most common ones. Aircraft fires tend to burn out quickly, so it is unlikely that you will see fire or smoke unless there are survivors. What is more likely is that you will see signs of a recent fire. In the woods, especially in an evergreen forest, the branches burn even if only in close proximity to heat. Fire and heat will turn the needles a reddish brown. Some fabric aircraft, when burned, show up only as a black framework and bear little resemblance to an aircraft. In the woods, they become almost impossible to pick out. Many parts of Canada are so heavily wooded that it's possible for light aircraft wreckage to be completely covered by trees. A swath of fresh cut or knocked down trees could indicate a crash site. Aircraft pieces, especially highly polished aluminum, will reflect light, usually as a result of the twisting and crumpling. light can be reflected from many angles. However, every lake, pond, brook, or ice patch may also reflect light. If the aircraft has crashed into water, the only clue may be an oil slick, a float, seat pillows, or other debris. Also be on the lookout for life rafts or individuals afloat in life jackets or clinging to pieces of wreckage. Watch for recent snowslides or other disturbances in the snow, since they could have been caused by a crash. Many aircraft have parts of their structure painted red, orange, or yellow, which is easier to see against a green or white background. The presence of carrion-eating animals or birds is sometimes the only indication of a crash site, so be on the lookout for gulls, crows, coyotes, wolves, or bears. If there are survivors, you can expect to see additional man-made signals. The most common type of signal is a fire, which can readily be seen at night, or the smoke from a fire, which is so easily visible in daylight. There are also many types of flares available. They range from small mini-pocket models sending up a thin streak of smoke that is often difficult to see, to large rocket and parachute types. Colored smoke, available in some survivor kits, is a great aid since it shows up so well against any background. Probably the one device that has been responsible for locating more missing persons than any other is an ordinary mirror, or the more sophisticated signal mirror. The flashing of the mirror is unmistakable. You'll have no trouble recognizing it. Searchers do not like fresh snow, since it can cover up all clues to the location of an aircraft crash. However, it can be an aid if there are survivors. This blue and white aircraft, on the blue and white ice and snow, would not have been located without 2 sets of footprints leading to the site. Survivors can also use the snow for messages, providing there is sufficient sunlight to cast shadows. Tramped out messages like this one can be seen from great distances, and if a message is made up of spruce boughs, it can show up even on a dull day. This sign is pretty explicit, but there are other internationally recognized distress signals that survivors may lay out. They are shown in your spotter's handbook. If the survivors have left the scene of the crash, they will be difficult to find. A person viewed from the top presents a very small image. Maintain a sharp lookout along rivers, the edges of lakes, and in clearings, since these are the places people will remain or travel along when they become lost. Now, if you think you've spotted something, here is the procedure to follow.
Turn left now, 7 o'clock for a mile and a half. I think I see something in the green field down there, just this side of the river, in the bend in the river.
Don't be afraid to report a sighting. Even if you are wrong, every possibility should be checked out. It is far better to report a suspicious object that may prove false than to assume it is nothing and bypass the crash site. React immediately. Tell the pilot to turn and start going after it. Remember that civilian aircraft search at slower airspeeds and you have more time to call the plane around. In military aircraft, such as the Hercules, which travels faster, you have less time. By the time you have spotted the object and called the pilot around, the object could already be a mile or 2 behind, which makes it difficult to keep track of. Practice sighting and turning the pilot quickly to stay on the target area. All that you need to say is, turn right, turn left.
Turn left. I think I have something here. It's at our 7 o'clock, about 3/4 of a mile out.
Use the clock method of reporting. Picture the aircraft as being the center of a clock face. The right spotter covers from 12 o'clock to 6 o'clock. The left spotter covers from 6 o'clock to 12 o'clock. Another reason to keep talking to a minimum is that the crew will be listening to the distress frequencies on which emergency locator beacons transmit. These beacons have a relatively short lifespan, and therefore it is important that the crew be able to hear these signals even if they are faint. The signal from an emergency locator transmitter enabled the search crew to find this aircraft. From normal searching altitude, it would have been impossible to spot. You have told the pilot where to look. Now you must describe how far away it is. If you were assigned a 1-mile scanning range, and you see the object closer in, you would describe it by using the approximate distance to the object.
Turn left, right in there in that little alcove of trees.
It's a real U shape. Oh, it's about a quarter of a mile or half a mile right now.
Keep in mind that as the aircraft moves, the clock will change position and the distance may also change. So continue to talk, constantly updating the pilot as you describe the object. In describing the object, find a prominent landmark and describe it in relation to the object. For example, you could use a lake, a bend in the river, power lines, roads, buildings, a group of trees. Describe how the landmark sits in relation to your object. Never use north, south, east, or west. You don't know your true direction when you are concentrating on spotting. Describe the lake as being farther away from it. The power lines are just to the right of it. The road is closer in. The group of spruce trees are just to the left. Larger landmarks are easier to see at first, so it's good to describe the bigger picture first. Then begin describing the smaller object that you see in the center. When you describe the object, describe its shape, its color, how big or small it looks, whether it is intact or apart. You can describe the color of the field or land it is on. This especially works well on the prairies. Continue talking to the pilot until you are sure that you are both seeing the same thing. Repeat the process as many times as necessary to pinpoint the object in question. In Casera aircraft, the pilot is directly in front of you and you will both see the same picture. In military aircraft, the pilot may be over 60 feet in front of you and will see the picture differently. So you must try to be as accurate as possible. Let's review the procedure we've just discussed. First, tell the pilot to turn left or right.
Turn left. There it is, in the bush.
Second, give the clock position. Third, calculate the approximate distance to the object and area. Fourth, describe the object from the larger picture to the smaller one. The spotting technique is the same when doing searches over the ocean or large bodies of water like lakes. However, spotting over water is especially tiring as there is very little contrast. It is also more difficult if there are waves and whitecaps. When the spotter does see something in the water, a marine location marker is dropped, which sends up smoke and allows the pilot to turn back to the target area. When spotting in the mountains, you must be aware that the pilot may not be able to turn the aircraft in the direction that you are spotting.
I've got a target back at 5 o'clock. Okay, I got some mark points.
The pilot may have to maneuver the aircraft in the opposite direction and come back around to your target area.
And my target was in a small little open area. I'm still on the right side.
Roger, we're downwind, left hand, setting up for the right exposure.
Copy on the right.
Stay in communication with the pilot so that everyone knows what is happening. When you do see something, report it as, for example, 3 o'clock high, middle, or low on the mountainside. In order to attract the pilot's attention, the spotter's voice must come over the intercom clearly and distinctly. That means that the microphone must be positioned so that it is in direct contact with the lips. You should speak loud enough to be heard. Ask the SARTEC or Loadmaster to adjust the volume on your headset so that you can hear clearly. You want to make sure you can hear the crew well and that they can hear you before you begin your spotting run. Keep unimportant conversation to a minimum. If you do see something, though, this takes priority even if the crew is talking. You must speak up and call the pilot around on the object. Remember, this is your job, and it is a matter of life or death. So do not be afraid to speak up when necessary.
On January 27, 1995, a Cessna 337 took off from Edmonton, Alberta, on a flight to Revelstoke, BC, with 5 persons on board. Somehow they flew up a blind valley near the Ram River west of Rocky Mountain House. This valley left them no escape as it closes up into a box canyon. At this point, the pilot ran out of flying room and they crashed.
You're up there cold, and a couple of us were beaten up pretty good, and we needed to get picked up and taken out. So we really knew that we needed to get found that night. I could walk. My back was broken, but I could move and I could walk.
A Casera aircraft, tasked out of Red Deer, Alberta, flew out to check on the ELT of the Cessna.
When Casera came over, when we saw your plane, We pulled out all the stops. We developed a theory that they had missed us because we didn't have a big enough fire. And I think it was Grant had the very bright idea of shining a very high-powered flashlight on you guys in the plane.
But the one light we saw was flashing, and it wasn't flashing in any sequence. It was just randomly flashing, and it was in the middle of nowhere. Mm-hmm. And we checked the map, and there shouldn't have been anybody in there, and that's where our the Homer was pointing.
We knew right away that he could see us as he started to circle. Sort of got to a point where obviously you'd seen our flashlight. We knew somebody up there was talking about us, and they'd be talking to search and rescue.
We just circled. We just stayed overhead. We just started circling. And then the people on the ground knew that we had located them as well. And I think we flashed our landing light as well.
Lights, and then they really got excited. You could see the light on the ground really start waving around.
After circling the site for some time and dropping several high-intensity flares, the Herc eventually dropped 2 Sartecs into the site. Much to their surprise, all 5 of the passengers were alive. At first light, helicopters and the Casera aircraft were sent to the scene. The helicopters were sent to extract the injured and Sartecs, while the Casera aircraft circled overhead and supplied a communications link with RCC.
It was a great feeling to have, first of all, the Casera team come over, and then very shortly after the Sartecs.
We probably all would have died without the system that we have in place, the volunteers.
Every search is important. If all the occupants are dead, our failure to find the aircraft may not seem important, but it is.
Oh my gosh, I told him I thought this was gonna... Please.
Just sit tight for a couple minutes.
What do you mean just sit tight?
Just sit here. Can you just sit here?
For the next of kin, it causes hardship and mental anguish. If there are survivors, our failure to find them is even more tragic. Imagine the hope that a survivor must feel watching a search aircraft flying toward his position. The horror and despair when he realizes he hasn't been spotted. Helpless, he watches the aircraft fade away into the distance.
Turn left now, 7 o'clock for a mile and a half. I think I see something in the green field down there, just this side of the river, in the bend in the river. Now at 7:30.
Volunteering to be a spotter is an important job. Lives are at stake, and you can be the one who saves them. Your role as a volunteer spotter is quite literally a matter of life or death.